Are you thinking about moving to Frankfort, Kentucky? You want to know the pros and the cons, the good and the bad? Discover the hidden gems and potential drawbacks of living in this historic capital city. From affordable living to limited transportation, we'll cover everything you need to know. So stay tuned to find out if Frankfort is the perfect place for you. We're going to get after it right now. So if this is the first time to the channel, be sure to subscribe and tap the bell for notifications so you'll be the first to know about all the market changes in the Lexington area or all over Central Kentucky. Hi, my name is Lisa Prather with Century 21 Simpson & Associates. We get calls and emails all the time from people like you looking to make the move into Lexington and all over Central Kentucky. We absolutely love it. So whether you're looking to move next month or 9 months from now, give us a call, send us a text, or send us an email. We'd be happy to help you make the smooth move into Lexington or anywhere in Central Kentucky. Frankfort is the capital city of the U.S. state of Kentucky and the seat of Franklin County. The population here is around 28,600 as per the 2020 United States Census. Frankfort is located along the Kentucky River. It's the fourth least populous state capital in the United States and the 13th most populous city in Kentucky. Before Frankfort was founded, the site was a ford across the Kentucky River along one of the great Buffalo Trails, and it was used as a highway in colonial America. English explorers first visited the area in around the 1750s. Evidently received its name after an incident in 1780 when a pioneer named Stephen Frank was killed in a little battle with the Native Americans, and the crossing was then named Frank's Ford in his memory. So in 1786, the Virginia legislature designated 100 acres as the town of Frankfort, and after Kentucky became a state in 1792, it was chosen as the capital. The city is located in the inner area of the Bluegrass region in Kentucky. The Kentucky River flows right through the city. It divides the city into north and south. So if you come into town, you'll always want to find out whether it's good to live on the east side of Frankfort or the west side of Frankfort. So we're going to get into some of the details, some of the pros and the cons of living in Frankfort. We're going to get going. So we're going to talk about the 5 pros and 5 cons of living in Frankfort, Kentucky. So if you're thinking about moving here, you really need to hear some of these things, and maybe some of your pros would be a con to other people or vice versa. So the number one pro that we wanted to look at today is the affordable cost of living. And lots of people coming from out of state, other states, they're just really impressed with the cost of living here in Kentucky. Really not just Frankfort, but all over, anywhere in Central Kentucky, it is a lower cost of living. The housing prices, utilities, cost of just daily expenses is much lower here, which makes it a better option for families moving here or people retiring here. Your money will go quite a bit longer. Your money will go a lot farther because of this cost of living. So we're going to talk a little bit about real estate prices, the median home prices here, and the cost of rent. So hold on. So when we're thinking about the affordability of living in Frankfort, the average price for houses on the market here in Frankfort are around $228,000. So that's significantly lower than most places that you may look. And those prices are up about 6% in the past year. So if we look here in my computer, I was just checking to see, it looks like the houses right now that are listed between $220,000 and $260,000 are only 8 properties. So really the inventory here is pretty low. So if it's something that you want to get into that price range, there are not a lot of houses to look for. But if you're looking at houses maybe up in the $300,000 range, then there may be a few more houses for you to choose from. So now we want to look at the second pro to living in Frankfort, Kentucky is the historic charm here. So if you drive down Capitol Avenue, all the homes along that stretch, all the way leading up to the Capitol, you're going to cross the Kentucky River, the bridge there, and you'll be able to see the Capitol up at the top of the hill. So it's just really a very scenic, historic place to see. Lots of older homes in downtown. Things are being revitalized. It's really a beautiful area to see. If you are interested in historic homes, downtown Lexington is really a beautiful place to look at. So we're going to check to see if there are any historic homes for sale and to see how much they would cost. So when we were looking, there really is only one home for sale in the downtown area. So as we stated earlier, the inventory is significantly lower at this time. But if we think about some of the other things to do and some of the other attractions and historic things to see in Frankfort, other than the Capitol, lots of people come into Frankfort, school trips to see the Capitol, but we have the Capital City Museum, we have the old Capitol, which is down on Broadway, and a pretty interesting architectural thing to see. You can step back in time and take a look at the old governor's mansion that is down on High Street. Pretty neat place to see. Frankfort is kind of the epicenter for all things politics in this area. You would definitely want to, if you are a history buff, you would definitely want to go into the Kentucky History Center. It is a very large, comprehensive building. It really just contains all things Kentucky, all the way back to the pioneer days. That you know, has displays set up. Just a really neat place to see. You can also travel over to the Frankfort Cemetery and take a look at Daniel Boone's grave. It's a giant monument here in Frankfort that overlooks the Kentucky River. So we want to look at our third pro of living in Frankfort, Kentucky, and that is its central location. Frankfort is located just between Lexington and Louisville, and so many people have, commented through the years, I wonder why Lexington or Louisville were not designated as the capital city. So that's a whole big issue about why that is. And if you look at Frankfort and where it is on the map, it is about 25 to 35 minutes west of Lexington on I-64, or if you get on, or it's about an hour east of Louisville. So it's really centrally located, so easy to get to either one of those cities. If you were to get a job working over in Louisville, you may live on the west side of Frankfort. As we talked about, Frankfort is divided east and west by the river. So if you wanted to live over on the west side of town, you would have about a 45-minute or so commute into Louisville down I-64. If you worked in Lexington, and you may want to live on the east side of Frankfort so that you can make that 20 to 30-minute drive into Lexington. Because the cost of living here in Frankfort is significantly lower than living in Lexington. So the central location here makes this a really nice place to live because you can get wherever you need to go easily due to the interstate. So now we're going to move on to our next pro. So we're looking at our fourth pro now, and we're going to call this a strong sense of community. Frankfort is a small-knit community where residents feel like they know each other, especially if your children are in school here or if you're involved in a church or a small community. The sense of community here is pretty strong because it is a more of a suburban town. It is easier to know who your neighbors are. If you're tired of city living and you want to know who your neighbor is, then Frankfort would be a place for you. So if we go over here to niche.com, now niche.com gave Frankfort, in the whole state of Kentucky, they gave them 7 out of 90 as a score for their diverse suburbs. They gave them a 25 out of 90 for suburbs with the lowest cost of living, and they gave them 38 out of 239 for their most diverse places to live in Kentucky. Now, some of the things about the area of Frankfort that we wanted to talk about, when we talk about community, you have to talk about schools, you have to talk about activities and things to do. So we're going to cover those kinds of things next. Okay, so we can't conclude our pros until we talk about the bourbon industry. Tons of people come into Frankfort every day due to the bourbon industry. So if you're thinking about coming into Frankfort, maybe looking for a home and moving here, whether you're retiring here or just relocating, you've got to check out the bourbon industry here. Just such a neat place to see. Even if you're not a bourbon drinker, You've just really got to see the historic buildings and all the things related. Down at Buffalo Trace, which is right in the heart of Frankfort, it got its name because it's right on the Kentucky River where the buffalo used to cross the river there. So that's how its name originated. People come from far and wide to stand in line. I was reading on Facebook, they have their own Facebook group of what is sold today at Buffalo Trace, and people comment on there, what type drink are they going to sell today? Different ones on different days. So if you're looking for a specific drink, it may not be sold on the day you're there, and they don't announce it ahead of time. You might want to go over to Jim Beam. There's Castle and Key, lots of different places that you can visit just for the historic charm if you're not there to taste the bourbon. Another bourbon related detail we need to talk about is the Bourbon Ball that was established here and made here in Frankfort at Rebecca Ruth. A delicious candy, always for sale there, and they have it at lots of different places all over Kentucky, and you can order it online if you're not going to be in this area. So that will conclude all of our pros for living in Frankfort, Kentucky, and now we're going to talk about some of the cons, which I hate to really talk about the cons, but we need to know what's the downside to living in Frankfort, Kentucky. So we're going to get to that right now. So now the first con that we want to talk about is, employment and job opportunities. So when we go back into niche.com, they really give Frankfort an A-, but Frankfort does have some limited job opportunities. There's not as much manufacturing here. Lots of the job opportunities here are state government type jobs. This is the seat of state government here in Kentucky, so lots of state employees work here. So that's one of the biggest sectors of employment in this area. But, according to niche.com, they gave jobs an A- based on the employment rate, jobs, and business growth, along with the cost of living. And it also shows that the median household income for Frankfort is $53,900. So it is significantly lower than other areas, but the cost of living here is definitely lower as well. If you're relocating due to a job, maybe you're moving in, getting a job in Lexington or Louisville, but you really don't want to be in those larger cities. So Frankfort would be a good place for you to relocate to, because you'd make more money in the larger cities that you go into, but the cost of living here in Frankfort is significantly lower. So that is our first con that we want to talk about. And now to con number 2. Okay, so the second con that we're going to talk about today is the weather. And maybe I think of this as a pro because I really enjoy all 4 seasons, although the cold weather is not really my favorite. But for short periods of time, it's fine. But in Kentucky, we have humidity, and Frankfort, right in the heart of Kentucky, we're drenched in humidity from about the end of May until about the second week in September. You can count on humidity, and July and August are our peak months for humidity. But we have temperatures that get sometimes up into the higher 90s. Not for as long a periods of time as maybe some of our southern neighbors, but we do have some really hot weather in the summer months. But that makes it fun for swimming adventures and days out on the lake, times out boating, playing a round of golf. All those kinds of things are fun activities to do in the summer months. In the fall, we have beautiful foliage here. Because the weather begins to cool, lots of people like to come into Kentucky and definitely over into eastern Kentucky just to see the foliage change here. It is a stunning time of year. So all the 4 seasons, we do have those here. So a lot of people say, well, that's a con because the temperature changes. And in the wintertime, we might have, ice storms but typically we only have now maybe a couple measurable snowfalls each year. It's not as bad as it used to be. When I was a kid, I really thought it was a significant amount of time that we were out of school for snow. So the weather, we're going to put it in the list of cons, but if you love the changing of the seasons, you love hot weather, cold weather, and all the weather in between, you will love Kentucky weather. All right, so moving on to con number 3, we're going to talk about the lower level of entertainment options. So as we discussed earlier, as one of the pros is it's a tighter knit suburban type community. That does lead us to see that the amount of entertainment options here is much lower than if you were in Lexington or even over in Louisville. Frankfort is not where you would go for nightlife, let's put it that way. But if you're looking at other types of entertainment, we do have other types of entertainment, such as people love to kayak and canoe down the Elkhorn Creek. The creek runs here. When the water is up, you will see that so many of our canoers and kayakers are out. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's cold weather. These people love this adventure. So if that's something that you love, I consider that entertainment. So those types of things are really neat here. People love to boat on the river. Some people keep their boats there on the river slips, and they love to go up and down the river. Summer months, fall months, it's a beautiful time to be out on the water. Also, we have events in the fall. We have a bourbon event in the fall where people come in from all over the area, right on the riverbanks, to taste all the different bourbons in the area. So there's always something to do, but we don't really have the events that some of the bigger cities have. Frankfort has a lack of some of these big activity places, like Falling Springs maybe in Versailles, or some of the the big water parks that other places might have. Frankfort doesn't have a lot of that. We do have one public pool, and it is quite crowded in the summertime. So that is really a con, and kind of sad for Frankfort that they really need to step up their game and add some new things for kids to do, for families, that would draw families into Frankfort. That to me is a con for this area. So yeah, we'll have to put it in the con category. So now let's look at our next con. Okay, so our fourth con that we're going to look at is public transportation. And I think this is pretty typical for most anywhere in Kentucky that you're going to live. Other than Lexington or Louisville, here in the central Kentucky area, transportation, really, for you to get wherever you need to go, you are going to need to have your own car to get where you need to go. There is limited bus service here, but it's really not something that you would be dependent on to get wherever you need to go. So transportation here would be an issue if you were not able to drive, or for whatever reason you were not a driver, or if you did not own a car. You would have limited access to get wherever you needed to go here in the Frankfort area. So we definitely want to put that in a con. Okay, so our last con that we're going to talk about today is education. Frankfort does not offer a lot of choices in education. So we're going to look at public education and how it's ranked by niche.com. So when I'm looking at the different high schools, it shows that Frankfort High School, which is the downtown school district, is given an A- rating. So if we open that up and look at Frankfort High School, they give academics a B, teachers an A-, clubs and activities a B. So Frankfort High School does have a higher ranking. It's actually noted as the number 7 best public high school in the Lexington, Central Kentucky area. It does give it a pretty good ranking. But if we go back and we look at Western Hills High School is on the west side of Frankfort, niche.com gave them an overall rating of B. They gave academics a B-, teachers an A-, clubs and activities a C-, and they were ranked as the number 12 best public high school in the Lexington, Central Kentucky area. Okay, so now we do have several private schools here in the Frankfort area, and some people choose to send their kids to private school. There is a large homeschool community here, as I talked about our suburban close-knit community as one of the pros. Then we do have these private schools and homeschools in the area. Now, thinking about post-high school and college and community schools here, we have Kentucky State University here in Frankfort, and it is a large community, not nearly as large as something you might find with Eastern Kentucky University or with University of Kentucky. But it is a local college here in the Frankfort area. So that does conclude our 5 pros and 5 cons of living in Frankfort. So what do you think? What would be some of your pros or some of your cons? Put them in the comments so maybe we can talk about them and see if you live in Frankfort or if you visited Frankfort. What did you think were the pros? Or maybe you've got some cons that we ought to talk about or think about. But if you're thinking about moving into Frankfort and you really like the affordability of living in Frankfort, feel free to give us a call, send us a text or an email. We would love to help you make the move into Frankfort or anywhere in the Central Kentucky area. So until then, we hope to see you around town.